Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tracy Scott, VP of Global Marketing Strategy for Kineo, and I want to welcome you to our webcast, Empowering Change for Nonprofits and Associations. If you would like to ask any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat, and we'll discuss them at the end of the presentation. And I'd like to now turn the mic over to our two hosts, Cami Bean and Ashley Reardon. Take it away.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're calling in from. Excited to have you all join us today. I'm Cami Bean. I'm a senior solutions consultant with Kineo. I've been with Kineo for 10 years and been in the learning and development e-learning industry for a long time, since the mid-90s. So we've been around the block a few times with this. Excited to join you all today. And my colleague, Ashley Reardon.
Yeah, hi everyone, Ashley Reardon. I'm Kineo's Director of Learning Design. I've been with Kineo about 4.5 years, but also in the e-learning industry and training industry for coming up on 20 years, so not far behind Cami. I'm based in New York City, which I see Ashley Park is another one of my twins based in New York City. So nice to see you virtually.
Yeah, excellent. And I'm in Massachusetts, if you all care.
We're a diverse team.
We are a diverse team. So we're going to be joined today by two of our distinguished client panelists. Really excited today to have Laura Hershenhorn, who's the Director of Expanded Learning and Youth Engagement from the California Academy of Sciences. Laura's in San Francisco. And we'll give Laura a proper time to do a proper introduction herself in a moment here. And Spencer Cheatham, who's a program manager with the International Association of Fire Chiefs. And Spencer's in Virginia, and you'll hear that in his voice when he starts talking. So we're going to do a quick poll, actually, just to get a sense of who's in the room today from the rest of you all. Today's webinar, or really it's going to be an informal chat discussion with Spencer and Laura to talk about some of the challenges they've faced and the solutions and we've put into place. And obviously Spencer's with an association, nonprofit association, and Laura is with a nonprofit as well. So curious to find out if all of you are the same. Sam, can you pull that poll over?
The poll's live, actually.
Oh, okay, great. All right, I can't see it, so now I can see it. All right, 56% of you looks like are in nonprofit organizations, so this will be very relevant to you. 11% with associations. We've got another 11% from corporations, and 22% of you are, well, 30, the numbers are changing as we speak, are from other. So perhaps that's an education institution or whatnot. So just want to thank everyone for joining us today. Good to get a sense in the room, and we will keep going. There also will be a recorded version of this. We will share this back out, just as everyone knows. So we'll share this out as we go. So Spencer, I'm going to turn it over to you and have you give a little introduction about your organization and the work that you do at IAFC.
Well, thanks so much. Hello, everyone. So the International Association of Fire Chiefs, we like to joke, we were formed in 1873. The idea was that the nation's fire service leaders would get together and figure out a way for the hose to connect between lots of different organizations. To this day, that problem still hasn't been solved, but we've been working on lots of other problems and in the meantime. So we are an organization specifically for the fire service and have grown to an international association, as our name suggests. Where I deal with mostly is the volunteer fire service. And in the United States, most of the United States is protected by volunteer firefighters. And we've really seen a decline in that. Some recent numbers just came out that up to 20% have diminished over the last 2 years. And so that's pretty significant. So we work to help in that area. I work on a team called the Volunteer Workforce Solutions Team. And we work to address the main things that are different between the volunteer fire service, which is leading people who don't get paid, retention of those people, and then the recruitment into those departments. I started with the organization in 2015, and I myself am a volunteer firefighter as well, and have been doing that for 24 years. Also did it as a career until I came to the IAFC. So anything else?
I think that's great introduction. Thank you, Spencer. And what I love about both of our clients today is just how the work that they do actually touches all of our lives. So, I have a volunteer fire department here in my town in Massachusetts. And I know that the work that Spencer does directly, affects my family. Laura, who's going to introduce herself in a moment here, I just want to share just a little anecdote. This weekend, I was doing a bio blitz in my town where people were going out onto conservation properties and recording all the biodiversity with plants out there. And there's this great app called iNaturalist. And as I was looking at it today, everyone was using it. This app is by the California Academy of Sciences, which Laura is with. So it was really exciting for me. I had a total geeky moment with that. But Laura, over to you to introduce yourself and the work that you do with California Academy of Sciences.
Sure, thanks, Cami. So I'm Laura Hirschenhorn. I work at the California Academy of Sciences in San Francisco. And the Academy is both a public-facing museum as well as a science research institution. And our mission is to explore, explain, and sustain life. So we have both scientists and educators at the Academy, and together we focus on building public awareness and agency around biodiversity science and sustainability. So that citizen science app that you were talking about, iNaturalist, is one of the ways that we get the community engaged with connecting to nature, learning about nature, and then actively participating in the scientific research process. So as a director of education here at the Academy, I oversee a portfolio of out-of-school time programs for middle and high school youth. So most of those programs are direct service, and that means that we engage our youth directly in science learning experiences here at the Academy or in our local community. But one of the programs that I oversee is called Science Action Club, and that's a little bit different in that our team designs the curriculum, materials, and professional development training so that anyone, anywhere can lead their own environmental science club in after school or summer camp.
Great, thank you for that intro, Laura. And we're going to dive down into a much more detailed, robust discussion about some of the challenges that these two organizations faced and how digital learning fit into that. I'm going to turn things over to Ashley right now.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Cami. And just a quick note. So we'll get to dive into their solutions as well in a bit here and see what some of those fun screenshots that you guys saw just a minute ago. So just to give the audience some background here, as we were preparing for today's webcast, we did ask Laura and Spencer in advance to consider a few questions related to what they were trying to accomplish, what was important to them, as well as some considerations for the solution. So what we're doing today is exploring a few of the themes that we heard come out because we suspect these themes probably resonate across other nonprofit, not-for-profit organizations. All right, so Laura and Spencer, as we were going through your responses, clearly each of you has a very different mission. You work in a different space, you have a very different audience, yet you both recognized a place for digital and blended learning and accomplishing your missions. When I looked across the responses you guys sent back, I really saw this common theme of driving change across large populations with digital learning. Actually, a theme not uncommon to any organization trying to bring about change. Large populations, how do we do this in a scalable way? So the first question I wanted to start with here is, we asked you guys to reflect on what problems you needed to solve for. And we heard a few things. You said you wanted to reach more people, deliver at scale, build knowledge and skills, provide training to empower with tools and strategies, and improve quality with more comprehensive materials in a more consistent format. Laura, I want to start with you and just ask you to kind of reflect for us on what were your most pressing problems with the Science Action Club?
Sure. So Science Action Club unlike the other programs that I was talking about, is really designed to transform environmental science learning in out-of-school time at scale. So whereas, the other programs here at the Academy, we're focusing on groups of, maybe 20 or 30 youth at a time, with Science Action Club, we're supporting between 500 and 800 programs, each of those with 20 to 25 youth each year. And so the program has run, since we were founded in 2011, the program has run in more than 400 communities in 26 states across the country. And our goal really is to increase both the quantity and quality of STEM learning opportunities that are available to middle school youth outside the traditional classroom. And we know, I think most importantly, that the impact of a great activity is ultimately really determined by how well it's facilitated. So we can design what we think is the most perfect curriculum, but it's really up to the folks who are implementing that with youth that will determine the success of it. So given that we know our audience, we know that about 72% of the activity leaders, the program staff who work with youth, that participate in Science Action Club, they work in after school or summer camp part-time. 34% of them are still students themselves. Less than 90% of them have a degree in science. So these are really, they're both novice, many of them are both novice educators and not necessarily trained or even deeply interested in teaching science. So it's our responsibility to provide training that will empower even the most novice educator with the tools and strategies that they need to connect youth to nature, build their STEM identity, and really teach relevant and meaningful skills that will empower a new generation of lifelong learners. And we're trying to do that at a distance. So we're not able to provide that direct service. We're really relying on both trainers and activity leaders and these other tools to get that message across and provide the strategies and support that will help these educators lead programs with youth with confidence and skill.
That's great. Thank you, Laura. Lots of good things there. Just the consistency of the delivery, but really focusing on something that helps them to feel confident, building up their knowledge and skills. Thank you. Spencer, I want to turn it to you now to just reflect on, what were your most pressing problems with your volunteer fire departments?
Sure. So when we look at training for fire departments across the country, the standards for that are based mostly in state and national level. And when you actually look at all the training, there is a lot on the operational side and even on the administrative side, as long as it is related to a municipal department. And what's unique in a lot of ways about the volunteer fire service is that a lot of them are nonprofit organizations. And so just like the audience here, they struggle with administration in ways that a lot of their municipal departments do not. They don't have a finance department to lean on. They have their own treasurer. They have their own corporation. And so in looking at what was going on with the fire service, there's some snippets here and there that webinars and articles on learning about the administration of nonprofits for fire service, but there's really nothing comprehensive, and we knew we wanted to do that. We also knew that we had to reach across the country, and that would be very difficult, and of course not necessarily the right platform for an in-person learning, but we knew that we needed to reach to these volunteer fire departments. Some of the things that they're dealing with, the recruitment and retention of members, is certainly an administrative issue, and we have to make a bigger difference there if we're going to turn that decline that I talked about previously around.
Great. So, I think what I love about both your stories is you're really looking to increase the impact that you can have, disseminating to more people who can get more involved, increasing in your case, Spencer, increasing the skill set of those volunteers from the standpoint of attracting more, retaining more, and Laura, you guys have really the altruistic mission of trying to help build more little scientists who can help save the earth. So let's go ahead and switch over to our next poll here, just to see, Laura and Spencer mentioned their biggest problems there, and want to see Which of these are really your biggest problems that you're trying to solve? So once we get this poll up, if you can just select what's your number one priority. Wow, 100% so far. Reach more people and deliver at scale. Not seeing much. Oh, no, it's changing. It's fun to see polls in action. So we've got reach more people and deliver at scale somewhere. It looks like we're getting an even split between that, building knowledge and skills, and improving the overall quality of our training materials.
Yeah, that's pretty even split there.
Yeah, exactly. It kept going up and down there, but yeah, we've got pretty much third. So let's get into a little bit more here of how digital learning can really help with these particular challenges. So moving on, Lauren, Spencer, you guys did come to us to talk about some digital learning, but before you came to us, you obviously had this notion that this was going to be a good fit for you and as part of your overall strategy. Spencer, I'm going to ask you to respond first. Where did you see digital learning being a good fit? Why did you want to go in that direction, knowing that you also have some in-person training? So what balance were you looking to achieve there between the in-person and digital?
Well, what we were really looking at is we had a traditionally delivered education through in-person training, and we knew we could not scale it to that degree with in-person training. And the other thing was, we even if we could, we weren't sure that was the right vehicle for what we were trying to teach. We do have an in-person training with this, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about that more later. But we wanted to set this up as more of some foundational knowledge, so that if people wanted to go further and take the in-person, they could do that, but that we wouldn't be sitting up there as the sage on the stage, if you will, in front of people lecturing and presenting. We wanted to be very interactive with their in-person. And so the digital sphere really opened up a lot for us, not just for reaching people, but even providing the right vehicle to go.
Right. So you could leverage your in-person experience for the right kind of moments.
Exactly.
That's great. Okay, thank you. Laura, what about you? Digital learning, you guys had a large number of people. You also have a small team from what I recall. So what was most important and why did digital learning come into your conversations?
Similar to what Spencer was saying, we also started out training activity leaders directly in person. So those are the activity leaders are the ones who work directly with youth. Then we recruited a cohort of professional development specialists to be trainers. And so we were training them directly and deploying them out into their communities to lead in-person trainings in their communities. So that was our first foray into kind of modest scaling. But the truth is that the realities of out-of-school time are such that we needed to reduce the barrier for entry for activity leaders. And so for us, that meant we needed to meet them where they are, both literally and figuratively, right? Like the training had to be accessible anytime, anywhere to accommodate their varying schedules. And it also had to be really comprehensive and available as a just-in-time resource. So we had folks who were coming to those in-person trainings. Usually the activity leaders were sent by a supervisor who just told them where to go and what time to show up. It didn't give them a ton of context about what they were doing there. And so they would arrive knowing nothing about our program. And the amount of time that we had with them was so short that it's just unreasonable to expect them to remember and retain all of that to go from 0 to 60 in a few hours. And so the digital resource not only allowed us to reach broader geographies, which is really exciting for us, but it also allowed us to, really package the material in a way that we felt was comprehensive and make it available so that activity leaders could use it on the timeline that worked for them. And so they could go through it once and then come back and refer back when they needed to. And so that was really helpful. And then the other piece, of course, you mentioned earlier was about providing that consistent messaging. and as part of scaling, one of the challenges is fidelity of implementation, right? We design it in this way that we think is ideal, and then we send it out into the world. We have no way of really monitoring that. So we hope to put together a resource that we would be using like the same language. Everyone is getting the same language and the same messaging, and the same resources that they could refer back to.
That's great. One of the things I'm curious about, and I'm going to get pinged by my colleagues here for throwing in an ad hoc question, but I'm wondering, with the barrier to entry or being able to offer these resources, do each of you, Laura and Spencer, see too? Spencer, you're trying to attract more volunteers, and Laura, you guys want more of the individuals, the high schoolers or job in between school to be getting into this. So that barrier to entry, how much do you see this potentially increasing the number of people that you can touch?
Well, for us, it's been pretty dramatic because we were trying to, because we were still trying to provide that consistent messaging on the smaller scale. We were limiting the ways that folks could get involved in the program. And so for a number of years, the only way that you could participate is if you were located in a community that had a trainer or had, that we could come to and train. And so in moving to this digital platform, and I was actually going to talk about this a little bit later as well, we've been able to add, several new communities, 5 additional states that hadn't participated before. And so in each of those areas, we're enrolling more programs with more youth and getting them involved.
That's great. Excellent. Spencer, what about you? Do you see that you might, with this offering, be able to attract more volunteers?
Absolutely. So like many of the nonprofits, the people that volunteer for us are working at usually during the day. And so their time is very valuable. They're giving usually about 48 hours a month to their volunteer fire department. So finding something that they can squeeze into their schedule is extremely important, and the digital learning really helped with that.
Great, excellent. Okay, getting us back on track here. So, Laura, I want to spend a little bit of time with you here. Before we get into the details of what we created for your solution, I just wondered if you could speak very quickly to the important considerations and requirements that helped guide the design of a digital experience. What was important to you?
Sure. So we actually had tried an earlier version of an online training course before we found Kineo, and we had developed it ourselves, and we learned a lot of lessons from that. Based on that experience, we knew that we needed a course that was really clean and sophisticated, but also fun and approachable. So too many of our educators are honestly afraid of science. They haven't taken a science course in years. It sounds scary to them. They don't have the confidence they don't even have the confidence to engage in science themselves, let alone facilitate activities for other youth. So we really needed our training courses to be inviting and supportive, but also have opportunities for the learners to demonstrate their knowledge and check for understanding, just not feel like there was a need to memorize everything or risk failing. Like there was this very delicate balance of supporting them and making sure that they felt that they were challenging themselves. They were really stepping into this. So there are all of those pieces, plus the need to be really easy to navigate and easy to return to. Because we had found that not everyone is even comfortable with digital technology. And so we were looking for something that was a very clean experience that they felt comfortable participating in.
That's great. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into it. Tell us a little bit about the structure of the curriculum that was set up, and just some intro to the design here, and then we'll go through a few images to share more about it.
Sure. So we have 3 different curriculum units. Each is a standalone, so folks can enroll in 1, 2, or 3 of them. So we have Bug Safari, Cloud Quest, and Bird Scouts. Each of them is anchored by a citizen science project. So, Cami, you were talking earlier about going out and doing a BioBlitz. And so iNaturalist is the citizen science project that's attached to our Bug Safari project. And CloudQuest connects youth to NASA scientists who are exploring climate science, and Bird Scouts, which we'll showcase here, has youth going out and using a platform called eBird to document the birds that are in their communities. So the course itself is targeted for activity leaders, who are the ones that are teaching the youth directly, but everybody, activity leaders and trainers, take the same course. And that way the trainers really get the full experience of understanding what the activity leaders will go through, and they'll be more prepared both to understand the elements of the program and address questions from the activity leaders. So it's broken up into several parts. The first part is very short, but it is a concrete overview of the program. And so an overview of the program, then a section about the science concepts that are relevant to that particular topic. And then the third part, first part overview of the program, second part background information, then a section where they go through all of the individual activities and directions that you need to go through those activities, and then there's kind of a library of resources at the end.
So this here is an example of like the activity section where all of the activities have their own topic that you can go and a deep dive on how to run that activity.
Exactly. And then you can see at the top of that page under Lead with Confidence that there are those two sections, your teaching toolbox and anatomy of the activity. So before we get into the specifics of how to do every activity, we provide some, again, strategies and tools for teaching STEM in the out-of-school time environment. So we're providing that foundation and background and context so that the following activities really make sense.
Great. So why don't you talk us through a little bit of, this is once we're in one of the activities, what were some of the important elements or the really useful elements that you saw coming out of this work?
Yeah, so one of the things is that it is built in Adapt, which different from what we had used before. You can, scroll continuously through each section of the course and interact with each of the components. At the top left of the screen, you can see our trainer, Diego. And so we brought in this element to, first of all, demonstrate, kind of try to not exactly replicate the in-person trainer experience, but have a guide there who could be that support and bring that thread throughout the whole course experience. And then each of the different components that you're looking at interacts in different ways, so that there's both the learning of the content, but also kind of opportunities for the learner to demonstrate their own knowledge or to test themselves. Mm-hmm. And then at the end, at the end of this page on the bottom right, you see a reflection section where we're asking activity leaders to think ahead to what is this going to be like when they're actually with groups of youth. What should they be preparing for? How are they feeling now? What do they want to remember? And there are spaces for them to enter that.
That's great. I mean, what I love about this, one of the things that you mentioned is these individuals may or may not be interested in science. They may not have an inherent desire to be doing this. But like visually in the kinds of activities, it does feel like such an exploratory, almost like an interactive museum type experience where you get to learn about bird sizes. So it's not, hey, teacher, this is what you need to teach about bird sizes, but actually letting them experience it for themselves.
Absolutely. And we do even say at the beginning, before they get into this section, we have a little piece that says like, hey, this next section is here because you're going to get a lot of questions about birds, and it might help you to have some basic information to begin to address that. But don't feel like you need to memorize all of this. Explore it and have a good time.
That's great. So this was a really fun activity, I think, that brought it all to life really for them. Can you talk us through this Build-A-Bird activity?
Sure. So Build a Bird is a chance for the youth to explore different features of birds and what they're good for, how they're useful. And this is an activity that we actually had done in person, and the youth do this activity in person with physical materials. And this was one of the fun challenges of how do we try to convey the same experience in a digital way. And so the Kineo team was really fantastic and creative in trying to solve this challenge. And so in this activity, the learner starts in the top left where they, choose a bird body, and then goes through the steps of then you choose a beak, then you choose wings, then you choose legs, etc. And you put it all together and you get your final bird of your making and a little bit of information about that bird, what its different features are good for, whether it would survive in the wild. I think it's both a fun activity and helps the learner focus on the pieces that we're most interested in conveying.
And it was so fun to build. I know that from the team.
I love this activity.
This
activity. And as a side note, there was some article last week on signs that you're aging, and one of the signs of aging, the number one sign was you're totally into birds now, which is absolutely what I have found. And it goes on this very descriptive paragraph about you're into birds, and you call your kids out and you tell them to look at the bird in the backyard, and they're like, I could care less. And how does your kid help you understand that birds are not interesting? And it's all full circle because I think birds.
We're in the business of trying to get those same kids excited about birds of their own accord.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right. I'll just make one other note here, which there's a couple of things too that I love about this, particularly these kinds of activities. Is I can imagine putting myself in the shoes of being an activity leader. Going through an activity like this in a digital format is really helping me to play out and create kind of a movie reel in my head of what would this experience be like with kids? How would I be walking them through and talking them through these things? So it's just such a well-rounded experience because it's hitting on so many different dimensions.
Yeah, and I see some really great comments right now in the chat box about using what's picture forward training. This idea that we know, the reality is that folks don't like to read a ton of text.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and it's also not that necessary, at least for us in this context, that, we really want it to be heavy on the visuals with enough text to convey the ideas and also to inspire curiosity. Our hope is that, we'll provide the basics and then we'll also provide some resources that you can go to if you want to learn more. But that not everything has to be front loaded.
Yeah.
And hopefully this will inspire both our learners and the youth to just get excited about this and pursue learning on their own.
Yeah. I think what was also great about this, Laura, is because we worked on 3 different programs, as you spoke about before. A lot of the experiences that were created, fundamentally, I think the framework for it all of the learning model and the learning experience carried over into each of those programs, where obviously it was, done to suit the content. So the activities would be different and based on the content. But it does seem like, where we all got to collectively was a place where you had this replicable model that you could keep building out this program for the future.
Yes, absolutely.
That's great. All right. Well, let's thank you, Laura, for walking through that. Always love seeing the California Academy of Sciences work and Science Action Club. So Spencer, I'm going to ask you to kind of do the same thing here. Let's just start off first before we get into your solution. I want you to speak to, from a design standpoint. We always ask our clients, what are the design requirements? We look at everything from your technical, but also want to understand what is most important for your audience, for these learners. And you mentioned a couple of things here, specifically relevance. So I wondered if you could speak to that first, and then we'll get into your solution.
Absolutely. So administration is really the bane of most volunteers in the fire service. If you think about it, one of the big drawing factors is the idea is that there's something different you can see every day. You can help the community through some extremely exciting ways. And most people who sign up for the volunteer fire service don't do so to take the minutes at the meeting or balance the department checkbook. They're doing so to go on those exciting calls and to help the community in those ways. But despite this, those are extremely important. They're extremely important tasks because without those, the administrative, the organizational arm of the department fails, and people don't want to belong to those types of organizations. So we knew we had to make this extremely interesting and relevant. We also knew that we had to tie it to what's in it for the individual. We knew that we know that people are motivated not by maybe what's best for their department. That can be a factor, but really by what's in it for them. And Kineo really helped us bring that forward.
That's great. Yeah, especially for volunteers. I mean, if you're not tapping into what's important to those volunteers, there's not going to be much drive or motivation to stick around.
Exactly.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about just the overarching curriculum here, and then we'll get into looking at the two different pieces, the digital learning and the instructor-led.
Sure. So we developed this overall course is called VALS, the Volunteer Administrative Leadership Series. And in that, there are 4 different tracks. There's one, leadership through engagement for the leaders or those who would like to be of their department. There's one on records management, sort of if you think of the secretary in that role. There's one for the treasurer or finance. And then there's also one for the recruitment retention coordinator. And that's a role, oftentimes it's a paid part-time position, sometimes the only paid person in a volunteer fire department whose sole responsibility is to bring people in and to help advise the leadership of the department on how to keep people in the organization. And so in this volunteer administrative leadership series, there's actually 17 different modules that you can take and learn about these different roles and the administrative arms associated with them.
That's great. So let's we'll dig into a few of the elements that really came through here. Why don't you talk to this here?
Sure. So what we have is, if you'll notice up top on the left, the diamond plate on the background is really a huge part of the volunteer or all the fire service. All the fire trucks that you know and see going up and down the roads have diamond plate, and so we love that background that Kineo came up with for us. And in the center screen, we did a lot of animation. And for example, this was an animation where, if you think about it, there are certain areas where when somebody's attempting to belong to or join a volunteer fire department, there might be some areas where if the department doesn't take the right step, they might not hear from them again. And so Kineo developed this animation that sort of shows this. As the pitfalls, it showed the pitfall, and then it said, but the recruiter made these adjustments and was able to really help. It gives that foundational knowledge again in a way that's also inviting and really brings the student along in the story of what we're trying to learn.
Right, some fun digital storytelling there.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you look all the way to the left, we have a great little thermometer, if you will. Basically, that's called the morale meter. And in volunteer departments, if you think of it, people don't have to be there. They're not getting paid to be there. And so what they're looking for is, if you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that self-esteem, that challenge, the feeling of belonging. And so morale is a very important part of a volunteer fire department. And so Kineo developed the morale meter. And this is a way, as you're going through this training, it not only keeps morale on the forefront, but depending on how well you do on the knowledge checks, your morale for your department can increase or decrease on how you do. So.
That's great. And I love too that, this, when I was looking at this particular one, the series of pitfalls, as you said, the story, the animation really went through this story illustrating and modeling how you can catch and prevent those pitfalls. But then it followed with this the scenario-based question, which is really that kind of immediate application, getting them to think about it, but it's a different situation. So this is, how do you make sure Caitlin avoids any potential pitfalls
Exactly.
following some setup? Excellent. So then tell us about this. Is the morale meter, is tracking how you do on those questions. What happens at the end of each course here?
So your morale has to be above 80%, and there's knowledge checks, as you can imagine, through each of these modules. As you go along, your knowledge checks sort of are tied to that meter, which if you look to in the upper left-hand slide, you'll see that little, to the right, that little temperature gauge almost. And so it's tied, the knowledge checks are tied to that temperature gauge, if you will. And so as you answer the questions, it'll improve or diminish depending on how you answer. If you want to go back and revisit the different knowledge checks, you're welcome to do so, to either raise your morale or to for your own edification. And so you have the opportunity to click on certain questions or the knowledge check, if you will, and go back and retake them. So it's not, you didn't get 80%, we're sorry. But there's other opportunities to go in and make up for anything you need to.
Great. Oh, we had a little blip on the audio there. So thanks, Spencer. I'm going to move us ahead just to look at a couple of really cool elements in your course. One of them was as you were going through courses, you were also earning these skill cards. So tell us quickly about these skill cards.
Yeah, so I think the best illustration is the upper right-hand corner. So as you go through these modules, you can earn these skill core cards, and we wanted to make sure that in reviewing what we learned in each module, that we did so a little bit differently. We also had an instructor-led portion that I'll get to in a second that we'll tie into. But so each of the knowledge checks and each of the modules had some foundational material that we knew we wanted to review. It had some actions that we wanted them to go back and take when they got back to their department to sort of motivate them to actually do something when they got back. It had some tips in the Ask the Expert part, and that would sort of pro tips, if you will. And then at the final part, the section showing it's locked, it was a question. It was an open comment box, and basically would ask a question for them to really think about what they were doing. Most of the challenges or the knowledge checks were true or false or multiple choice, as you can imagine. But in the apply it section on the cards, they really had to think about how they inputted that and showed a little bit more critical thinking instead of just the ability to answer a question.
Yeah, what's interesting, just to make a connection between your program and Laura's program, is that element of reflection, and I know it's something that we really often forget to try and get people into these reflective moments. And I think this was a really nice solution that our learning consultant Jolt came up with here for how to get them to think about, okay, I've learned these skills, how am I going to put it to use on the job?
Jolt did a great job, not only with the cards, but he came up with the morale meter as well. So great job,
Yeah,
Jolt.
yeah. We love Jolt. So let's just talk here about the ILT, transitioning from the digital learning piece. What was the carry through with this ILT?
Well, another great idea the Kineo team had. So in our instructor-led portion, we take one of the tracks, the recruitment and retention coordinator. And as I said, this is a role in the fire department where their job is to bring people into the fire department and make sure they stay. So recruitment and retention. This is also something that there's very little training out there, and there's certainly not a certification for. If you join a volunteer fire department, you can get a certification in how to extricate people from a vehicle. You can get a certification in how to take them off of a water tower by rope or fight fires in a high-rise building. But you can't find a certification course for the recruitment and retention coordinator. And we knew we needed to do that because this is such an important part of bringing more people into the volunteer fire service. So in the ILT, the student comes in. They have to take the entire 4 hours of recruitment and retention online training. And then we bring them into a 2-day classroom that is no presentation, no lecture. It is all exercise. And we put them into the role of the recruitment retention coordinator through role playing, through group exercises, and lots of other fun, engaging exercises. One of the things that we did was we brought the cards from the online training, the ones that we just showed, and we actually made a deck of cards. So these are 8 by 4-inch cards. They're broken up into 4 suits, if you will: recruitment, interviewing, size up, and retention. And we actually we give the student a deck of these cards they can go home with and they can reference, but we reference them often in the class. For example, in the recruiting section or the interviewing section, they actually have to interview one of the instructors who plays a certain role, and they'll use the cards to ask to sort of as a template for how to conduct the interview and work through that. That's just one example. We use in the 2-day course, we use the cards right often and have them break out the cards and use them as they can. So
that's great. Wonderful continuity and again, reinforcement of, tying in the digital learning. So the digital learning isn't just like in one year, out the other year, but really bringing thematically through those elements helps to reinforce and encourage recall of what they learned in those upfront modules. Great. Thank you, Spencer. I'm going to move us along here and actually punt it back over to Cami.
Yeah, so it's great just hearing the solution overview for both organizations, and these have been out there for a while. So kind of want to talk a little bit about the results and the impact you've seen. Spencer, just because we're just finishing you up, I'm going to actually stick with you. And I've seen some really amazing feedback just on LinkedIn that you had shared, where people were just raving about the ILT and how it meshed with the e-learning. What's the general impact that you've seen? Have you achieved your objectives? What's this experience been like now that it's out there in the wild?
Well, we have some far-reaching objectives. We really want to turn the tide on the diminishing number of volunteers in the fire service. And so it might be a little early to say we've reached our objectives, but we've certainly seen some success. And where we've seen that online is we've had the ability to we do a post-course survey, of course, and we get some excellent feedback. About 90% of the people will say they would recommend the course, and about 76% say they would recommend it without reservation. Wow. And so that's been really good. The ILT has been, wow. When we look at the ILT, 100% recommend their course without reservation. And the ability to tie the two together has been great. As I said, it's about 6 hours of pre-work, all of it before they come to the ILT. And 4 hours of that is online training. And so that's very important that they get their foundational knowledge there. In fact, I'm emailing with people today. We're doing a course this weekend, and a couple of them haven't finished their work. So I'm working with them right now to make sure they finish up. So you can't come to the course without that foundational knowledge. And so we certainly haven't seen our objectives. They're far-reaching, but we've seen success, and we're very hopeful.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I mean, you're really taking that kind of long view approach. You were saying yesterday as we were talking, like 3 to 4 years is really where you're going to start to see kind of that reduction in turnover. So we have to be patient.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Laura, what about with the California Academy of Sciences? How have you seen these courses out in the wild?
Yeah, it's going great. We do annual evaluations of our program, and both anecdotally and through those more formal reports, the findings have been outstanding. So, for example, we administer a retrospective pre-post survey question, asking SAC educators how prepared they felt before and after the training to do 3 key things: lead SAC with youth, help youth connect with the natural world, and help youth build their STEM identities. And activity leaders reported that before the training, only about, say 40 to 50% of them felt prepared to do those things. Whereas after the training, the rates jumped to the 90s for all three of those areas. So that was really exciting just to begin with. The responses were even higher for our trainers. So maybe 50 to 60% of them felt prepared before the training, but after the training, the rates were between like 98 and 100% for those key areas. So we love seeing that self-reported confident, increase in confidence, increase in feelings of preparedness. But we're also hearing, anecdotally that that fidelity of implementation that I was talking about earlier, I think is stronger than it had been before because of all of the all that the courses offer and that ability to go back and refresh memory and check in and get everything that they need when they need it. So they're not just relying on something that they heard several months ago or even a couple of years ago. And then I mentioned earlier that not only is the increase in confidence and skills in terms of facilitation increasing, but also we're able to reach more youth and more programs. So we've added 5 more states since last year. It's like over a 20% jump in the number of states that we're running in. So yeah, all of it is it's going really well.
Yeah, so you're hitting that scale. You're preparing people. I mean, you're kind of hitting all those big objectives that you were after. So thinking about our audience today, we had a lot of nonprofits on the call today. If you think about, what advice would you give similar organizations as they're looking to implement digital learning either for the first time or for a second project? What would be kind of your key advice? Laura, we'll start with you this time.
Sure. Do it thoughtfully and with intention, right? That's, I think that was a driving theme as we were going through the process of designing and producing this work. We really had to think deeply about, what it was that we want to accomplish. And, right now there's a lot of exciting momentum around digital learning, and the field offers incredible opportunities to reach audiences that may not otherwise have access to really a professional learning community, right? It's not just the intake of the information, but being a part of a broader network. But we need to be thinking about what do our learners need, and what is it really that we're trying to accomplish? What specifically are we trying to convey, or what kinds of experiences are we trying to design? And I think it's worth spending the time and the resources to produce online trainings that are relevant, that are meaningful to the work that our learners are going to be engaged in, and also that are designed with that keen eye toward the optimal user experience.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, Spencer, you may touch on this a little bit, just thinking about your advice, but you often talk about the process when you started with us. Share your advice and talk a little bit about that, because it's all about that intention and that intentional design process.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is the first project of this nature that I've worked on. And when we first got the proposal from Kineo, they spent a lot of time in their timeline on setting up before they actually started building. And then when we went with Kineo, we emailed back and forth a few times and had a conference call, and they were emphatic that we needed to get together and have a meeting, a 2-day meeting on top of that, to set up this strategic document. And I work remote. We do everything through video, and I was like, I got to go and meet in Chicago. So, but they were emphatic, and we're so glad we did. When we did, they were able to really pull from us what we wanted from this. But not only that, they did such a great job of identifying so many of the different people that will be the audience for this course. And so we spent 2 days with them and spent hours just building characters, if you will, but people who might be the audience for this course. And it was great. And so I would say pay attention to the big picture as well. Those strategic pieces that we made in the beginning paid off so much down the road when some obstacles, if they raised their head, we knew when we went back to the strategic piece what we needed to accomplish. And so I would say pay attention to the big picture.
Mm. Yeah, I like to call it measuring twice and cutting once. I'm sure you've heard me say that before.
That's a great way to put it. And I didn't believe you at first, but it paid off.
He didn't believe me at first, but it does pay off. And as we, sort of look ahead to the future, and just for every, kind of every learning journey that we're designing, it is important to take that pause and recognize that, it's all unique. I mean, your California Academy of Sciences challenge, obstacles, objectives, similar but different than what IAFC was trying to do. And, for everyone out there, you want to spend that time doing that upfront analysis so that, you can read the beautiful image here that helps illuminate the right composition for your journey, right? Like it is kind of a unique story you tell on every single project, and you don't want to take a cookie cutter approach when you're really focused on trying to achieve results that are going to have an impact on your organization, on the people who volunteer for your organization, and ultimately on the, could be the health of the planet, the safety of our citizens. Like the work that you do really matters, and digital learning can be a really profound piece of that structure, of that journey, of that solution going forward. So we're really proud and excited to be part of that with both of you and with our other clients for sure. We hope all of you who've been on the call today have enjoyed it. This recording will be available, so you can come back and check things out again and share it widely. Kineo, we're here to help you with your challenges and solutions as well. So please reach out to us. I'll share some contact info. I'm happy to field any questions at this point. There have been a few along the way. Ashley had asked about LMSs. And I will say, so for the California Academy of Sciences project, that was developed in a tool called ADAPT, which is a multi-device HTML5 responsive framework. We did the course design, not their LMS. As Laura said, they have a third-party LMS. For IAFC, that was created using Storyline. That's the tool that IAFC uses internally, and so we wanted to align to what they were using. And IAFC uses Cornerstone, I believe, for the learning management system. If you have any other questions, please feel free to shoot them into chat, or you can reach out to us.
Hey, Cami, this is Tracy.
Yeah.
We do have one that occurred early on, and you may have addressed it, but I did copy it down. This is from Kevin Gibney. His question was, what is your opinion on using picture-forward training with adult students?
Yeah, Ashley, did you talk about that? Yeah, I think you kind of.
Yeah, I think Laura touched on it a little bit. I mean, we do. This is a big thing, and we hear it quite frequently. Is that clients will say, "I don't want walls of text." And if you were to go back and look at the way that things are presented, whether it be in ADAPT or in Storyline, we're really focused on trying to bring things to life through experiences and less about just a text dump, if you will. But even in the Science Action Club courses, the bird safari one, if you were to look at that, I mean, those are all interactive elements that you will get as you click on some of the interactive elements. You'll get some text as you're exploring that, but the text is really delivered in manageable chunks where you get to really process what you're going through and what you're experiencing. So we really try to strike the balance between information presented as text with visuals, and then of course delivered whenever we can through engaging activities, exercises, scenarios, digital storytelling, switching up the consumption of the material for some variety, but also just making it so that people can really engage in those different ways and don't have to be reading on screen.
Great, thanks. Hey, and there's one comment. It's not really a question, but I just wondered if either one of you wanted to make a comment. Susan Demers said that one of her challenges is finding a cost-effective LMS to host the 2 compliance courses that their volunteers must complete annually. Any thoughts on that for her?
There are so many LMSs out there in the world, Susan, as I'm sure you know, where you just have 2 courses. You might look at something like a subscription model LMS like Litmos or Adobe Captivate Prime. Those are kind of available month to month. And it really depends on your audience. Feel free to reach out to me if you want to talk LMSs. I can certainly speak more to that. And if
Great.
anyone has any suggestions out in the audience for Susan, please type that in, because you may know something that I don't.
Okay, well, we are at the end of our time. I wanted to thank you, Ashley and Cami, as well as Laura and Spencer. I think it was awesome. I like this format a lot. We will probably doing a lot of this in the future. Just as a reminder, you can get the recording of this webinar from our website, but we will also be following up with everyone who attended and registered with a link to that recording when it's been prepared and posted. And of course, if you want to carry on the conversation, you can reach out to us on Twitter, or you can send us an email via info@kineo.com. Again, thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.